I don't like liars. This happened 5+ years ago, and it's still one of my proudest moments. I was dating this guy, Dan, going through a custody battle with his ex-girlfriend over their toddler. We worked at the same bar with this girl named Billie Jean. Billie Jean was an old friend of Dan and had worked with him before. She also had previously worked with the mother of Dan's child, Rachel, and everyone was seemingly friends and remaining civil. Or so I thought. Billie Jean had secretly taken sides and wrote a terrible affidavit lying about Dan. Dan somehow got a copy of it. I don't remember how the court process went. As I was reading it, I kept getting more and more irate. I hate liars, and one thing I really feel that crosses a boundary is using a child for leverage to hurt the other parent. Billie Jean was knowingly lying under oath and siding with Rachel to prevent Dan from parenting his kid. And he was by no means a bad dad. Well, Billie Jean had enemies. Enemies that I worked with and had easy access to contact. These enemies had sold Billie Jean a car that she wasn't paying them for. I didn't necessarily like the people who owned the car, but the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I called them up and told them I came in peace. I asked if they had Billie Jean's address to get back their car. They did not. I passed off Billie Jean's info and waited for her to call me. Now, I was one of two people who could have ratted out the location of her car. And when Billie Jean called me to tell her her car got repoed, she said she had no idea who could have done it. It would have been me or her ex Robbie. I tell her casually, I don't think it was Robbie, and I swear up and down she responded with, well, who would have done it then? I held back laughter and finished the conversation saying, oh, I don't know, that's so weird type comments until she hung up. Dan was next to me in the car snickering. Dan won shared custody of his child, and Billie Jean lost her bar job because she didn't have transportation to work an hour away. To this day, I wonder if she ever pieced together that it was me. I don't like liars. So, not only was the ProRevenge legal, it was awesome. I feel like lying about your ex-partner to try and get custody of your kid is just downright awful. Like, I can't really think of a situation where that would really be okay or necessary. If they truly were a horrible parent, I don't think you'd need to lie. Manager insists I do my job properly. Happy to comply, sir. Preface. In early 2020, I was hired under the title Assistant Manager at a local automotive shop. We sold mainly tires and alloy wheels for passenger vehicles. The company owned several stores. I reported directly to my manager, who then reported to the owner of the company. Shortly after I was hired, I noticed the behavior of the manager was far from professional. He would constantly mock and berate me for being the new guy. I believe part of this was jealousy and insecurity on his part, as I ended up recording more sales under my name within the first few months. He would also knock off work early and start drinking beer whilst the rest of us continued to work. I remember when he found out that I participated in MMA training sessions after work, and he tried to goad me into a fight for his own amusement. Clearly, this guy didn't like me, and I was starting to get the feeling that he was trying to get me to snap or lose my cool, and as a result, my employment. I became even more certain of that with what happened next. Story. During the first few months that I had worked there, I had noticed that our takings for the day and sales records did not match. I would often spend half an hour to an hour after work trying to figure out where the errors were coming from, whilst my manager would simply throw his hands in the air and exclaim that he had no idea how this was happening. The recurring issue seemed to be that our cash takings had been recorded incorrectly. There would sometimes be an excess amount of cash that didn't match up to what was recorded on our sales/invoicing software. Other times, there would be less. I was, at the time, an accounting student studying towards my bachelor's degree. I was already suspicious of the cash being out each day. However, given how the manager had been treating me up until this point, I was concerned that any complaint would somehow be twisted and used against me. And boy was I right. Several weeks later, my manager took time off. During this time, I managed a personal record in store sales, and also noticed something interesting. The cash was never out at the end of each shift. I reported this directly to the owner of the company. Given I was acting manager during the time my manager was away, I was expected to report to the owner every day, and explained what had been occurring whilst my manager was there. In all honesty, I was hopeful that the owner would be having a word with the manager about the discrepancies. However, I was also weary, as I believed once the owner spoke to my manager, that the manager would immediately know it was me who reported this. When the manager returned to work, he immediately approached me with a disgruntled look on his face. "I've spoken with the owner. You tried to blame me for the discrepancies? You should focus on doing your job properly, then this wouldn't happen." I was quite taken aback by how angry he was. Though I wasn't surprised that he twisted it and tried to place blame on me. Given his reaction, I'm even more suspicious at this point. He wants me to do my job properly, huh? Malicious compliance ensues. That same week, I got to work. I started paying attention to what customers were paying when they were dealing with my manager. Behind his back, I began examining all of his sales transactions and invoices with a fine comb. As the days rolled by, I started to find evidence of his dishonesty. When it came to a few cash sales, my manager was doing the following. Example, would tell the customer the price is $200 if he pays cash. Would discount the price by $50 in the sales/invoicing software, would put the extra cash into the till and record a $150 cash sale. Before we did the cash up at the end of the day, he would sneakily pocket this extra cash whilst no one was around. Though he was very foolish, as he clearly couldn't remember the exact amount he had swindled. Hence why the cash would be up some days, didn't swindle enough, or the cash would be down, swindled too much. End. I took screenshots of the discounts he had been giving on sales and sent them to the business owner along with a report. A report with detailed descriptions of my findings. The report also showed that on all days he wasn't there for the cash count, there was no variance. The owner was infuriated. This man had been his trusted employee for years. The owner was so infuriated, in fact, that he ordered my manager to do a mandatory drug test, pee in a cup style, on the same day he found out, and no surprises, he failed. Turns out, the manager had quite the meth habit. This was most likely his sole motive for stealing cash, and the owner was beside himself. We operate machinery every day in this store, and so the thought of a manager walking around high as a kite wouldn't sit well with any health and safety professional. In fact, it could have landed the owner in serious legal trouble if any accident or injury occurred under this manager's watch. The manager was terminated immediately for violation of his contract, and was later taken to court by the owner in an attempt to recover the stolen funds. Safe to say, I was promoted to store manager position shortly after his termination. This might sound horrible, but I've heard from a lot of people who work retail that the quickest way to climb the corporate totem pole is to just wait for other people to get fired. I guess, in this case, OP took things into his own hands and sped that process up a bit. Nice work, OP. Want to have your cake and eat it too? Two-timing baby daddy gets his just desserts. For context, years ago, I, 20 female, and the father of my first two children, 26 male, were going through a rough time in our relationship. He was working the night shift as a janitor in a nursing home, while I was going to college for nursing during the day. We had a 1-year-old, and I had just given birth to our son 3 months earlier. There was a woman that he worked with that I had gotten to know pretty well when I would bring him his lunches. We were friends, or so I thought. He was supposed to be waxing the floors at night when no one was up and about. Just so happened, my cousin ran into him and her having drinks at a local bar on one of the nights he was supposed to be working late. Cue massive fight, got off early, just friends, blah blah blah, won't happen again. About a month later comes the talk. We have been fighting too much, let's keep this amicable for the kids and stay friends. Mind you, the house was mine, I paid the bills with grants and scholarships I earned through school, and the car he drove was mine too. I would be nice and allow him to stay till he got something figured out, still take my car to work, I still fed him, all that good nonsense. Then he starts being loving, and we continue a physical relationship. I happened to be feeding our son one morning while he was still sleeping and his phone went off. I know, don't look for it, you don't want to know, right? Turns out, he's been carrying on a relationship with the other woman the whole time he's been seeing me. It would have been fine if that's what he wanted, if he wasn't doing the same with me at the same time. Cue petty revenge. I crawled back into bed with him, naked, and he snuggled up like he always does. I took pictures from his phone, nice and graphic ones. I sent them to her from his phone, along with a very nicely, in my opinion, worded message explaining everything that he had been up to and into. Then I got dressed to the wonderful pings from his phone and continued about my day packing his things. He woke a few hours later and went for his phone first thing. I happened to come into the room as he's trying to call her, and when he turns to look at me, I can see all the blood rush from his face. He can't even mount a defense as I tell him all about the conversation me and his new girlfriend have had, along with some photos. All his things are now out on the porch, boxed up. I tell him he no longer lives in my house and has to leave. He starts to blubber about where will he go. So I told him that he better call his girlfriend to come pick him up and live with her because he sure as heck isn't using my vehicle anymore. And that sounds like his problem, and I shut the door on him. I had been with this man-child for 6 years. Given my body, heart, and sanity to this man. Heck, I was even willing to still let him live there, not paying bills, eat there, and drive my car, for him to be sleeping with both of us at the same time. Was it petty? Heck yeah, but it was deserved. My thing is, what was this guy bringing to the table at all? When the story started, I was thinking, oh, she goes to school and he works. So he must be paying most of the bills, right? Nope, she paid for pretty much everything in their life while going to school. In my opinion, she shouldn't feel guilty or petty for kicking him out, like, at all. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's stories, and I'll see you next time.